Hello, my name is Gillian Crowther. I'm the Director of Research at AONM, and I'm going to give just a brief introduction to the Armin Labs tests that we do. So I'll just share my screen and enlarge it to full screen. So I'll be talking today, first of all, about B cell and T cell testing. Now, the tests that the NHS in England generally offers for pathogens are antibody tests involving IgG and IgM. Now, in recent infection, antibody testing is generally reliable as long as the antigens are specific. The marker you can hope to see is an IgM, immunoglobulin M. That will develop after a little while, but the problem is it only lasts for a short time, a couple of months generally, and then it switches to IgG, immunoglobulin G, which is a memory cell, or it's a marker for past infection. So it's what you're trying to boost also with a vaccine to give people protection from the same infection. So you don't have a marker that shows whether a person is still infected if it's become chronic. Looking at the next slide, for example, this is an actual test I did receive from a patient. She had 183, these are, I think, absolute units per milliliter, and the reference range is below 6. That was for the IgG, and for the IgM, she was negative. So she was simply told, you don't have that infection anymore, but you have signs of having had it in the past. And similarly below, you can see an EBV, that's an Epstein-Barr virus result, of 36 for the IgG, where it should be below 5 to be negative. So she's got signs of having had that in the past, but no IgM. So again, she was just told that the results were suggestive of past or latent EBV infection. So that's really not helpful if you want to know whether a person still has the infection, however long ago they were infected, or whether they've had a reactivation of the same infection, because on reactivation, generally an IgM isn't produced again. So B cells have their shortcomings. The most useful antibody actually is IgA, immunoglobulin A, because that is, if it's present, still active along the mucosal membranes in the body, and that's a very long tract from behind the eyes all the way down to the anus. So if that's picked up, then that suggests that the person does still have that infection, however long they've had it. And so that A isn't used in the tests generally offered on the NHS, and B, it isn't available for all infections, because if that infection doesn't live in the mucosal membranes, then it's not used, and you can't get a CS mark. You can't get a certification for it as a laboratory. So that does exist for chlamydia pneumoniae, for example. Mycoplasma pneumoniae, they do live in the mucosal membranes. Herpes simplex virus 1 and 2 do, and varicella zoster virus, Coxsackie, echovirus, Campylobacter, and others. So this is an example of chlamydia pneumoniae positive for IgA as well as IgG. But here you have the sign of positivity along the mucosal membranes, and the patient could well have picked this up long ago. The same with Coxsackie, where you can see here 1 to 100, where the reference range is below 1 to 10. This is a titer, by the way, and what is done is the infection is diluted up using fluid to see in what dilution you can still find it. And here it's been found in 1 to 100. The next level of dilution is 1 to 350, so this could actually be even higher than that. Coxsackie is an RNA virus. It's an enterovirus, and it is quite common in the UK. For Epstein-Barr virus, there is what's called an immunoarray, which has 9 different bands at ArminLabs. And if you do an antibody test using that many bands, then it does have its uses, because even on the NHS, if they do sufficient bands, and they generally only do 3, but if you have several of them up, including the early antigen EA or the Epstein-Barr nuclear antigen EBNA, then it is often considered to be positive or a reactivation, even if it is IgG. That's because a large number of studies have been using those markers and have evidenced, particularly over the last 4 years, reactivation of Epstein-Barr with those parameters. But as far as I know, ArminLabs is actually the only lab with that many bands, and so you've got a good chance of seeing which are positive and which are negative with that many, whereas again with the NHS, which only has 3 bands, even if you only have 2 positive, they'll generally not consider it to be overall indicative of a current infection. So that's really quite problematic. Here you can see a very florid result that is likely to be positive. You've even got an IgM there. So it's a specialty of ArminLabs that they do T-cell testing, and T-cells are the other arm of the immune system, and well recognized, of course. I mean, there's nothing opaque really about T-cells. It's just that they aren't used in the UK except for SARS-CoV-2. There are now tests which were done with Public Health England, in fact, and introduced during COVID. So T-cell testing is known, but it isn't used here for any other infections. So that's one of the real pluses of ArminLabs, is to do T-cell testing, because if that's positive, then that's, that signifies a likely continuing infection, however chronic it is. And that's a lymphocyte transformation test. You've probably heard of an LTT, using an interferon gamma release assay. There are many, many references for that. We can send you pages of them if you'd like to have further references for the validity of T-cell testing, and this is just one of them, explaining that it is often considered to be a gold standard. The recent new edition of the Borrelia-Burgdorferi Methods and Protocols 2024 has an entire chapter on the ELISpot technique, which was written by Dr. Schwarzbach, who is the CEO of ArminLabs, together with other colleagues. And just one quotation from that here: many clinical laboratories are convinced that the cellular assay is superior to the Western blot assay in terms of sensitivity for detecting underlying Borrelia infection. Now, Borrelia is the causative agent of Lyme disease, and T-cell testing is a cellular assay, and Western blot is one type of antibody test. So really what this is saying is that T-cell testing is considered superior by many laboratories. And actually it's called ELISpot testing at Armin Labs and other labs around the world. It's not just Armin Labs that uses that term for this T-cell test. So these are examples of it. For example, Borrelia burgdorferi here is measured using what's called a stimulation index, SI, and anything 2 and above is considered positive, whereby 2 and 3 are weak positive and above 3 is positive. And you've got 3 different perspectives on Borrelia here. The full antigen, the outer surface protein mix, and the lymphocyte function antigen 1, which all needs a little bit more description another time when we talk specifically about Lyme disease. You can see here below an example of a mycoplasma ELISpot that is 7, which is of course higher than 1. So that indicates current cellular activity. Here you have a very high level for cytomegalovirus, which is a member of the herpes family at 355. The ELISpots for cytomegalovirus and Epstein-Barr virus are divided into lytic and latent parameters. Lytic means it's currently replicating. So that indicates current cellular activity against the pathogen. And latent means that it's dormant, but it's still significant in that it suppresses immunity and it can unfold again if there's another new assault to the immune system. So with a result such as this, Epstein-Barr virus of 657 stimulation index, that's really very high indeed. We've never seen numbers like that before COVID. It never really went above 300. And so that's a sign of very likely current activity that needs therapy. So the ELISpot can be used as a staging titer or a staging marker for treatment. Here, for example, you can see it going down in the course of antibody treatment. And it's a good idea to do the T-cell test only 4 to 6 weeks after you've noted an improvement in the patient, because the T cells have a life of 4 to 6 weeks, and so they take that time to turn over. And you'll only see the new ELISpot level in a T cell 4 to 6 weeks after the cells have recovered to that extent. There is also a test called an iSpot, which you'll see on our form. It is a form of ELISpot, but it shows convalescence as well as current activity. So that's useful. It's a bit like having a sort of lytic and latent value for a lot of the other tests. That is available for most of the tests for which ELISpots exist. And the negative ELISpot or interferon gamma shows that the patient no longer has it currently replicating, but the IL-2 marker, which is what you're seeing in the other arm of this iSpot, shows that you've got a latent or cured state of the infection. And I'll show you a few examples of it here. This is Borrelia with an INF gamma set of results, which is the equivalent of the ELISpot, and then an IL-2, which is the other arm of this iSpot. It always needs very careful interpretation, and we're very happy to either talk it through with you or go back to the lab if you choose to do this. So COVID testing is also available, and you can use IgG, IgA for that. You can see in the above example that the patient is both positive on the IgG axis and on the IgA axis. So that's a patient that still has the infection showing, whereas in the test below, they've got a sign of immunity to the infection with the IgG, but have overcome the current infection because they have a negative for the IgA. So how do you decide what to test for? Well, ArminLabs have forms on which you can enter the patient's symptoms, and a lot of them are autofills. In other words, they'll automatically fill with suggested tests depending on the symptoms that you've entered. It's important, please, to always fill out past symptoms as well as current symptoms, because you're looking for stealth infections, which the patient may have picked up at any point in their lives. So obviously it's a bit of a tightrope act whether to count something as a symptom or not, but generally patients have a good sense of that. And you can see here that, for example, the post-COVID checklist has come up with a number of ones, which are highest priority infections to consider. 2 is second priority, and 3 is third priority. So chlamydia, pneumoniae, mycoplasma, and the herpes viruses have drawn for first place here. And with some further questioning, one can generally work out which of those herpes viruses are the most likely, because they do all have their own specific criteria as well. And we do have what's called a symptom list that does give an overview of the different signs and symptoms of each of the infections that are tested for at Armin Labs. So that's actually up on the website under Armin Labs, called Symptom List. This is the post-COVID viral reactivation panel in 2 forms, both basic and advanced. The basic form is very reasonably priced, because only the lytic perspective is used for Epstein-Barr virus and cytomegalovirus. So you don't have the latent value, but this does reduce the price. And so the infections that are most commonly reactivated post-COVID, or during what's called long COVID, really, have been chosen for this test. And if you choose to do the advanced panel, which is here, then it gives you a few more tests, which also have good scientific backing for them. Many, many articles, as you know, peer-reviewed, with good cohorts, have been produced over the last 4 years, evidencing that HSV 1 and 2 can also reactivate, as well as HHV6, which has been associated with chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, for 4 decades, really. And chlamydia, pneumoniae, and mycoplasma are here too, and weren't on the basic panel. So we have a large selection of panels that can be selected from for both viruses and bacteria, and these are on the website. So both all the tests on a separate sheet, as well as supplementary tests on a separate sheet, and then these panels are all available on the website under Armin Labs, and then order forms. So currently the ELISpots and iSpots are available for this list of tests, beginning with Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi, and another form of Borrelia called Miyamotoi, and various different co-infections. How these all manifest and what the signs and symptoms of them are is a much longer story. So if they're new to you, then do please have a look at past presentations that Dr. Schwarzbach himself has given, or contact me. My details are at the end of this presentation, and I'd be very happy to both send you literature and or talk you through the checklists that you may have filled out for your patient to decide which infections seem to be the most likely. So Immunological testing is also valid at Armin Labs. The CD3 and CD57 plus cells are particularly helpful because the CD3 cells that you can see below CD3 plus and the absolute are what you're looking for, really, not the percentage. They give an impression of the viral immunity of the patient. Here you can see it's low at 905, which is just barely within the reference range, but very low. And the CD57 plus natural killer cells give an impression of the patient's bacterial immunity, and here it's far below the range. The functional range is actually much higher than this. It's 130, but the conventional reference range is 100 to 360. So this is far below that. And as it says here, this result indicates chronic immune suppression, which can be caused by various bacteria, including Borrelia. With this test, you always receive a blood count as well, as you can see above, which is very useful. You've got the eosinophils, the differential hematology there with neutrophils and lymphocytes and several other markers. You can order, of course, far more. Armin Labs does also offer a full blood count if you wish, which you can add on to any test. And this is another example of immunosuppression that is evident from both the bacterial and the viral markers. So mycotoxin testing is also available at Armin Labs. It's a relatively recent addition done by the same very good laboratory which developed the TICPLEX test that I haven't actually covered. Perhaps I'll say a few words about that at the end, but this is called ToxyPlex, and this is a direct immunochemical detection of mycotoxins. And the advantage of ToxyPlex is that it doesn't use human urine, it uses blood, because the use of plasma or serum is 5 times more common than urine in literature. And the variation in urine volume means you really do need to normalize it against creatinine, which is generally not done. And also the daily mycotoxin intake varies and really demands 24-hour sampling. And it also often, by many accounts, just reflects the previous day's nutritional intake. And if you've consumed mycotoxins in your food, then those will be seen in the urine. So there are many advantages to testing mycotoxins in the blood, and it does actually reflect or detect mycotoxin molecules directly. The monoclonal antibodies are coated on the ELISA plate. They're highly specific to each particular mycotoxin. And if that mycotoxin is present in the patient's sample, then it will be captured by the corresponding monoclonal antibody. So this is quite a unique and first of its kind test. In comparison to other test providers, you can see some pros here. Of course, one doesn't want to sort of do down other providers, so I won't go through this in great detail, but there is a lot of reliability in the ToxyPlex test that can be seen here. And we can always go back to the test providers themselves and get further information if you wish. They're actually based in Finland and are called Tested. So this is an example of the results. You can see there a high positive result for ochratoxin A. You do actually get a figure there, which you can compare with a repeat test later if you wish to do one, and a positive for deoxynivalenol as well. So parasite testing is also available at Armin Labs. They've long had tests in blood for parasites, and I'll show you those in a moment. Newer is a stool-based parasite PCR test. and they have 2 unique panels available, one for intestinal protozoa and one for intestinal helminths, with a very high level of accuracy and a detection limit that was 100 copies per reaction, and swift return of results as well. So this is a very efficient and useful test. Now, we do also have a parasite checklist, which I'll show you in a moment, which makes it easier to decide which test to do. This does cover Giardia, Entamoeba, Cryptosporidium, Blastocystis, Diamantiba. You will have heard of all of these. And so the parasites in blood that can be tested are here on what's called additional tests. This form is also up on the website and very reasonably priced. Toxoplasma, for example, which you'll know can be picked up from cats. That's why women who are pregnant are told not to go near a litter basket, because it is actually very common. Very high numbers are noted by, for example, the CDC for the States. Very high percentage of the population are found when tested to have toxoplasma, and Toxocara canis is from dogs. This is the parasite checklist, and it also has an autofill function over there on the right, so that you can see the top ranking parasites to test for, second and third choices. So how do you navigate through the web pages on Armin Labs, the Armin Labs tab? Well, go to, please, AONM.org, and you'll see the Armin Labs tab up there on the top line. And the drop-down list has the price list and order forms third on that drop-down list. Many other very useful sections as well. And you can also order online. So that's again on that top line, but a little bit more to the left. And what you do is click on that. You'll come to this page here, go up to the top and click on Login. And if you're registered, you'll just be able to put in your details and go straight in and order. Sorry, I need to put that differently. If you want to register, then put in your details, and a very short and efficient registration process will sign you up, and otherwise put in your login details there on the left, and you'll be able to get in right away. There are discounts for the tests for practitioners. Do just contact Armin Labs to find that out. And otherwise, I'm very happy to always help with advice, both pre-testing to help you with selection for your patients, and post-testing if you would like to know a bit more about the results that you've received. So my details are there, my phone number and also my email address, or contact the helpline on info@aonm.org. They're all day, every day. It's always possible to contact them. And the telephone number for the UK, 03331, etc. And if you're calling from abroad, it's obviously got the dialing code 0044. So thank you very much indeed, and just contact us anytime.